silence of the Iranian dawn was not broken by the call to prayer, but by the high-pitched whine of jet turbines and the invisible hand of electronic warfare. At exactly 9:27 in the morning, Tehran time, on February 28, 2026, the Middle East as we knew it ceased to exist. In a daring daylight operation dubbed Epic Fury by the Pentagon and Roaring Lion by the Israel Defense Forces, 200 fighter jets, the largest strike package in Israeli history, crossed into Iranian airspace with a singular, lethal objective: decapitation. This was not a border skirmish or a proxy exchange. It was a total systemic shock designed to paralyze the heart of the Islamic Republic. For decades, the world had lived in the shadow of this moment, a theoretical Third World War that many believed would be fought in the dark. Instead, the United States and Israel chose the harsh light of a Saturday morning during Ramadan, gambling that the element of absolute surprise would outweigh the risks of a daytime assault. The primary target was a fortified compound in downtown Tehran. For 15 years, analysts at the Defense Threat Reduction Agency had studied this single coordinate, mapping its ventilation shafts and geological weaknesses with a level of obsession that bordered on the religious. Intelligence had confirmed that the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was meeting with his inner circle of military and political commanders. The strikes were surgical and overwhelming. Approximately 30 precision-guided munitions tore through the layers of reinforced concrete. In an instant, the man who had ruled Iran with an iron fist for 36 years, the architect of the axis of resistance and the face of anti-Western defiance, was gone. Reports from senior Israeli officials, later echoed by President Donald Trump on Truth Social, confirmed the unthinkable. The supreme leader was dead, buried under the rubble of the very fortress he believed would keep him safe forever. But the carnage was not limited to one man. The strike was a dragnet that swept up nearly 40 senior regime figures. Among the fallen were the commander of the Revolutionary Guard, Mohammad Pakpour, and the defense minister, Aziz Nasir Zadeh. In a single morning, the entire command and control structure of the Iranian state was effectively severed. While smoke billowed over the ruins of the presidential palace and the Ministry of Intelligence, the geopolitical shock waves traveled faster than the sound of the explosions. In Washington, the administration framed this as a preemptive necessity to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran from holding the world hostage. Yet, as the internet flickered and died across the country, 92 million Iranians woke up to a vacuum of power. The superglue holding the system together had dissolved, and the question that immediately gripped every capital from London to Beijing was not just who died, but what kind of monster would rise from the ashes of such a devastating void. The world barely had time to process the fall of the supreme leader before the Shield of Judah operation expanded into a regional conflagration. As the smoke cleared from the initial decapitation strikes, the full scale of the American-led Operation Epic Fury was unleashed, involving 900 strikes in a mere 12 hours. This was a meticulously choreographed display of military hegemony, utilizing B-2 stealth bombers, 3 destroyers, and 2 massive aircraft carrier strike groups, the USS Gerald R. Ford and the USS Abraham Lincoln. The targets were not chosen at random. They were the pillars of Iran's military-industrial complex. Ballistic missile silos, drone manufacturing plants, and the highly secretive nuclear enrichment facility at Fordo, drilled nearly 100 meters into solid rock, were hammered by 30,000-pound GBU 5.7 bunker buster bombs. American planners sought to achieve what years of diplomacy had failed to do: the total, physical obliteration of Iran's ability to project power. However, the axis of resistance did not remain silent as its heart was being cut out. Despite the initial paralysis of their command structure, the remnants of the Iranian military and its regional proxies launched a retaliatory wave of True Promise 4. This was a scorched earth response that transformed the entire Middle East into a free fire zone. Ballistic missiles and swarms of attack drones were not just directed at Israel, but at 6 Arab nations hosting United States military assets. Doha, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Manama were suddenly on the front lines of a war they had desperately tried to avoid through Omani mediation. In the United Arab Emirates, the sky was a lattice of orange flashes as missile defense systems engaged over 300 incoming threats. Debris from intercepted missiles rained down on residential districts, claiming the life of a Pakistani national in Abu Dhabi and causing a massive fire on the facade of the world-famous Fairmont Hotel on Dubai's Palm Jumeirah. The economic and humanitarian toll began to escalate with terrifying speed. In Qatar, the Al Udeid Air Base, the largest American facility in the region, shook under a barrage of 65 missiles. In Bahrain, the headquarters of the United States Navy's Fifth Fleet was targeted directly, forcing families and residents into a state of blind panic. The message from Tehran was clear: If the Islamic Republic was to fall, it would take the stability of the global energy market with it. Iran immediately moved to close the Strait of Hormuz, the 21-mile-wide choke point through which 20% of the world's oil supply flows daily. As the price of crude oil began to spin out of control, the international community realized that the limited surgical strike promised by some in Washington had officially mutated into a global strategic emergency. This was no longer just about a regime in Tehran. It was a violent renegotiation of the world order, played out in the skies over the most volatile region on Earth. As the thunder of the bombardments echoed, a brutal information and psychological war erupted to shape the future of a leaderless nation. President Donald Trump, monitoring the campaign from Mar-a-Lago, directly called upon the Iranian people to seize this moment and topple the remains of the regime. He declared that the hour of freedom had arrived and that this could be a generational opportunity for Iranians to reclaim control of their destiny. This message was delivered as Iran itself was deeply divided. Verified videos showed segments of the population secretly celebrating and even laughing in the streets of Tehran at the news of the supreme leader's death. However, fear remained pervasive as internal security forces, particularly the Basij militia, remained a highly dangerous variable capable of suppressing any uprising with the same lethal force used in recent crackdowns. In Washington, consensus on this attack was far from absolute. Some lawmakers, including Republicans like Thomas Massie, criticized this as an act of war unauthorized by Congress, warning of the unforeseen consequences of a protracted conflict. Conversely, supporters like Senator Lindsey Graham viewed this as a historic opportunity to reshape the Middle East and permanently eliminate the Iranian nuclear threat. This friction reflected a complex geopolitical reality. While the United States and Israel claimed to have destroyed much of Iran's command capacity, intelligence experts warned that the regime had prepared succession plans and emergency chains of command. The figure of most interest now is Ali Larijani, a powerful member of the Supreme National Security Council, who survived the strikes and immediately promised an unforgettable lesson for the United States and Israel. The carnage of the war also began to reveal itself through undeniable humanitarian tragedies. One of the most shocking images was the ruins of a girls' primary school in the southern Iranian town of Minab, reported to have been hit by a missile, killing dozens of children, while U.S. Central Command stated they were investigating and affirmed they would never deliberately target civilians. The event was immediately used by the Iranian regime to incite outrage among the public and the international community. Meanwhile, in Israel, millions of citizens remained in bomb shelters as sirens sounded continuously due to waves of retaliatory ballistic missiles fired by Iran. This battle was no longer a quick surgical strike. It had become a devastating test of wills between a superpower attempting to impose a new order and a regime fighting for survival amidst the rubble. The technological disparity on display during the initial hours of Operation Epic Fury has effectively rewritten the manual on modern aerial warfare. On the morning of February 24, a single F-35C Lightning II, returning to the USS Abraham Lincoln, encountered 6 Iranian F-4E Phantoms, relics of a different era kept airborne through decades of cannibalization and reverse engineering. Using advanced sensor fusion and low probability of intercept radar, the 5th-generation fighter engaged the Phantoms from beyond visual range. The Iranian pilots, flying blind with analog systems from the 1960s, were systematically eliminated in a matter of 8 minutes. This encounter was more than a tactical victory. It was a demonstration of a technological abyss where courage and experience could not bridge the gap against physics and stealth. Shortly after, American Growlers and Super Hornets launched a secondary wave, flooding Iranian radar sites with electromagnetic noise before destroying maintenance hangars and airfield infrastructure at Tactical Fighter Base 6. However, the military's most complex achievement occurred at the Fordo nuclear enrichment facility. Buried nearly 100 meters beneath solid rock and reinforced concrete, Fordo was long considered indestructible by conventional means. On the night of the primary strikes, a B-2 Spirit stealth bomber utilized a sequence of GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators. Rather than attempting to punch through the mountain directly, the operation focused on threading bombs down the mountain's own architecture. The first 30,000-pound bomb removed the defensive concrete cap from the primary ventilation shaft, allowing subsequent munitions to travel down the tunnel at over 1,000 feet per second. The resulting shock waves from the internal detonations were designed to shatter the supersonic centrifuge machines, which are sensitive to even fractions of a millimeter of displacement. Despite the flawless execution, a chilling intelligence mystery remains unresolved. Satellite imagery taken 3 days before the strikes captured 16 cargo trucks moving 400 kilograms of enriched uranium from Fordo to an unknown location. While President Trump declared the nuclear program obliterated, A preliminary Defense Intelligence Agency assessment suggested the strike might only be a 3 to 6 month setback because the core stockpile was moved before the bombs fell. The International Atomic Energy Agency, whose inspectors were expelled following the attacks, currently cannot verify the status of the program. The most critical question of the war is now buried under a mountain in the Qom province that no Western observer is allowed to enter. Operation Midnight Hammer may have destroyed the buildings, but the material for a nuclear weapon is likely still hidden in a tunnel network that continues to expand. The strategic calculus of the Trump administration shifted from mere pressure to full-scale execution as the tactical realities of the limited strike began to bleed into a broader regional war. Before the missiles flew, Admiral Brad Cooper, the commander of U.S. Central Command, met with President Trump to present military options that ranged from surgical strikes on ballistic missile launchers to a prolonged, sustained air campaign. This briefing occurred on the same night that nuclear diplomacy in Geneva collapsed, as Iran reportedly rejected core U.S. demands, including the permanent dismantling of the Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan facilities. By the time the USS Gerald R. Ford arrived off the coast of Israel, the decision had been made to move from deterrence to decapitation. The intelligence community, however, remained divided on the true state of Iran's nuclear progress. While the administration claimed an imminent threat, a confidential IAEA report leaked just before the strikes revealed that Iran was storing 440 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium underground at Isfahan, a target that only the massive GBU-57 bunker buster bombs could reach. This disclosure provided the specific coordinates necessary for the American B-2 bombers to strike with absolute precision. Yet, despite the massive ordnance dropped on these sites, the Defense Intelligence Agency cautioned that the nuclear program might have merely been forced into more secretive, smaller pockets across Iran's web of 30-plus nuclear sites. As the military campaign enters its second day, the geopolitical stakes are higher than ever. Iran's proxies, specifically Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq and the Houthis in Yemen, have been activated to prepare for a war of attrition against American forces. While Israel has been striking Hezbollah's elite Radwan force preemptively in Lebanon to degrade their retaliatory capacity, the risk of a multi-front regional war remains a terrifying reality. The economic walls are closing in just as fast as the military ones, with the Iranian rial collapsing to over 1,600,000 to the dollar and capital fleeing the country. The world is now watching to see if the removal of the supreme leader will lead to a rapid hardening of the regime or the total collapse of the Islamic Republic's authority. The legacy of Operation Epic Fury remains an open wound in the collective memory of the international community. While President Trump hailed the mission as a tremendous success that achieved the noble mission of neutralizing a generational threat, the regional reality tells a far more complicated story. The Islamic Republic has been decapitated, but the survival of key hardliners like Ali Larijani and the president ensures that the regime's remaining apparatus is fueled by an instinct for absolute survival. Thousands of miles of scorched desert and urban sprawl are now haunted by the uncertainty of who truly holds the reins of power. In the streets of Tehran, the cheers for the death of the tyrant are often drowned out by the screams of those caught in the crossfire of retaliatory strikes. Geopolitically, the map of the Middle East has been violently redrawn. The Arab nations that secretly lobbied for this intervention, such as Saudi Arabia, are now forced to reconcile their support with the missiles landing in their own neighborhoods. The global economy stands on a knife's edge as the closure of the Strait of Hormuz chokes off the world's energy supply, and the Iranian rial's total collapse threatens to turn a nation of 92 million people into a failed state. International law experts continue to debate the legality of a preemptive strike launched without a United Nations mandate, arguing that the erosion of these norms may invite future aggressions from other global powers. As the week-long bombing campaign continues, the ultimate endgame of regime change remains a gamble of astronomical proportions. American and Israeli forces have proven they can dismantle a government from the air, but history from Iraq to Libya warns that they cannot so easily build a stable democracy from the rubble. The question is no longer whether the Ayatollahs are gone, but whether the gift of the Jewish nation and the hour of freedom promised by the West will lead to a new era of prosperity or merely a more dangerous chapter of a forever war. For now, the world can only watch as the smoke rises over Isfahan, and the next generation of Iranians decides whether to step into the light of a new future or the shadows of an even deeper military-religious dictatorship.